G'day, Professor Joseph Drew here. Have you ever thought about how many councillors your council should have? Whether you should have wards and how many? Whether you should have a directly elected mayor or not when it's an option? I bet you haven't thought about how much it costs. In this video I'll outline all these things. They're very important because lots of councils are putting these decisions in front of their people and making these decisions in their council chambers. And I'm not sure people are making the decisions with the full array of information that they need to make good decisions for good outcomes. This is important because, as I say, lots of councils are changing matters, and I don't think they have the information they need to make good decisions. There's significant fiscal implications associated with your political structure, more significant than the assumed savings from amalgamations and lots of other reforms. There's a lot of money to be saved and a lot of money to be spent if we do this properly or not. And it's particularly important to newly amalgamated councils, the councils in Queensland and New South Wales. Not a lot of thought was put in to wards, the number of councillors, representation ratios, and the method for electing mayors. Well, it appears that not much thought was put into this. Lots of communities, particularly smaller villages and outlying rural areas, were completely disenfranchised by new amalgamations. And it's really important that we start thinking about this better. And if you are in one of those councils and you've accidentally disenfranchised entire villages, perhaps after watching this video you'll know how to mitigate matters. So what type of variation are we talking about here? I think you're going to be surprised. And these figures are based on New South Wales, and I just happen to have the data close to hand because I was doing a paper on this sort of topic. But the similar variation exists in every state, except for the issue of directly elected mayors, where it's mandated in some states. So in New South Wales, out of 128 councils, we have 4 councils where there are no councillors. 4 councils, they're in administration, they're run by a bureaucrat appointed by the Minister of Local Government, who has complete and absolute powers. I find that a transparency and accountability concern, and I've got a video about is administration the answer, and no, I do not believe it's an answer ever. We've got councils that have the minimum number of councillors, 5, and we've got some councils that have the maximum, 15. The average across the state is 10.616. We have councils that have 5 wards, which is the maximum number, and we have 76 councils who don't have wards at all. So 50 odd that do. We have 35 councils that have directly elected mayors. So 90 odd where the councillors elect the mayor. Now, it's quite possible that this variation is for good reasons, in response to the needs and the demand and configuration of the communities. Particularly population density plays a big part in what is a reasonable representative structure. But it's also quite possible that a lot of this has happened by happenstance and just has developed over the years without much thought being put into it, and that serious changes could be made, and changes that could benefit both the population and the bottom line of the council. Number of councillors. There's a huge variation in New South Wales. We took a look at the representation ratio. This is the number of people per councillor. 165 in the lowest representation ratio area. 26,647 in the highest representation ratio area. They're all in the one state, and all these councils think they live in a democracy, but they're very different types of democracy. The average is 5,300 people per councillor, and this is one reason why local government is such an effective political structure, and why decentralisation is the best way to deliver most goods and services, is because you have much stronger voice at the local government levels. the number of people per councillor dwarfs what that is per representative at the state or federal level. Now, there's sometimes good reason for having very low representation ratios, particularly in low population density areas, particularly in rural areas made up of several large villages. It's really important that each village, where possible, has the potential to elect a voice to their council. So sometimes it may be necessary to have low representation ratios in order to ensure that the voice is distributed evenly and everyone can be heard at the council chamber table. Moreover, it's important to remember, contrary to a lot of people's perceptions, councillors are an extremely small part of the cost structure of a local government. In terms of bang for your buck, you get an awful lot from appointing an additional councillor. Now, sometimes it might make sense to reduce the number of councillors the same cost, but the costs are at the margin. It would depend on the desperate nature of your financial circumstances, whether that would be warranted reducing the councillors. For very big councils, of course, putting on an extra councillor or two is a tiny, tiny fraction of your cost base, and the benefit in terms of political accountability and transparency is likely to be much larger than the relatively small fiscal costs involved. So it's a lot to think about. It's not just these representation ratios. We need to think about the distribution of people in the geographic area, and we need to think about population densities too, because of course the lower the population density, the further you've got to drive to get around to see your constituents, and that is important also. Wards is a much more cut and dried matter. People think that wards preserve voice. No, they don't. They skew the way voice is heard or amplified in the council chambers. It means that the proportion of votes that one gets from an electorate as a whole will not necessarily be representative of the actual councillors who get elected on council. So it's a distortionary mechanism, and there's got to be very good reasons for using it. Now, often it's proposed that wards are good in an amalgamation scenario. They're not. They're the worst possible thing you can do for a couple of reasons. One is it cements divisions and it preserves old identities and it has people thinking in terms of us and them from the very get-go, and it's certainly not going to lead to cooperation if you think about Axelrod's cooperation theory. The other big reasons, this chart here is taken from a paper I did a few years ago. It was on Victoria, but the same results in New South Wales or any other state. And it's backed up by a body of theory called the law 1 on N. And what it says is the more wards you have, more fragments you have, the higher your costs are going to be. And in this work I've shown, as you can see in model 4 there, that for each additional ward, your unit costs increase by 3.4% at the highest level of statistical significance. Now that is an absolutely massive result, and I don't think most people realise that their ward structure is costing them so much. I'll repeat that association. For each additional ward you have, an extra 3.4% to your unit cost. It's a massive expenditure, and there'd be very few situations that would warrant that additional expenditure, would warrant the introduction of a division within your local government, and would warrant the potential distortion of the one vote, one value policy, which lies at the heart of most democracies. Now we'll turn to the issue of directly elected mayor. So this is when the people vote for the mayor rather than the councillors vote for the mayor, which was always the traditional way in Australia. Now I think people will be truly stunned at this, but once again, peer-reviewed work and quite a good journal. And what do we find? We find that the presence of a directly elected mayor increases unit costs by just shy of 13.5%. That is astounding. If you want a directly elected mayor, it's going to cost you an extra 13.5%. And you go, well, why would that be? Well, the main reason is, and the main reason for having a directly elected mayor, is that they can get a personal mandate, they can run with that mandate, they can be a can-do, go-to person for other tiers of government and business, and they can get things done. Great, they can get things done, that's going to cost you money. Now, this isn't a problem if you increase your revenue by 13.5%. But if you're making these decisions without increasing your revenue, without thinking about the fiscal implications, of course, it's a huge problem, isn't it? And why does it happen? It happens in part because the perspective of the mayor changes entirely. A mayor elected by the councillors is beholden to the councillors and needs to take on board and weigh far more heavily the views of the councillors. A mayor elected by the people only wishes to please the people. It's as simple as that. So in summary, there's, as I say, lots and lots of councils having referendums on these matters. And I've yet to see one council that's provided information to the residents about the political implications, but also the economic fiscal implications of the decision that they're putting in front of these people. Now, I've given you some of this information. You had glimpses of papers. If you need more information, get in contact with me and I'm happy to help. I only want the best for local government, as do you. And that's why we need to all help share this channel, subscribe, and like the video if it's a topic that was helpful to you. Thank you very much for your time. Goodbye.